So we're almost live. For those of our buddies just joining, let us know in the chat what you think a design sprint is. There are no wrong answers here, so it's whatever you think, and then we will learn about them together. Awesome, we are live. Welcome. We're here with us today are our buddies at MURAL. And today we'll be going over what design sprint is, and tomorrow an actual interactive design sprint at the same time, around the same time tomorrow, where we can go over a design sprint together based on what we learned today. And before we get started, I will share very quick, briefly, what Design Buddies is in case y'all are new. I'm Grace. I founded Design Buddies back in April of 2020 because I want to make some buddies in design, and here we are today. And so far we've done a lot of events, workshops, and resources to help y'all level up your design career. And this is slightly not updated, but we've done over 100 events now. Counted is a lot, but it's fun. And yeah, you're welcome to connect with us on any of our social media platforms. And before we get started, some short house rules are events are recorded, but that means you can also access them later on in case you want to go back and check anything. But if you do not want to be recorded, you can find us on YouTube, and we are live streaming right now there as well, as you get the same thing. Feel free to engage in the chat if any of our panelists or speakers say something you resonate with, or any of our buddies say something you resonate with. Chat with each other in the chat and just vibe. And then you also have a networking sheet where you can keep all your promotional links in. At the end, I usually just let people plug away, and so you just stay till the end, so you can plug your LinkedIn or whatever thing you want to plug in the chat as well. We'll do Q&A on Zoom. We also take group selfies towards the end as well. We also have some Zoom backgrounds in case y'all want to twin with us. We have a lot of variety, you can choose from there. And then feel free to share your takeaways on social media, tag us. We would love to reshare it. Connect with each other, hop into our Discord, have fun. And with that, I'll hand it over to Adrienne.
Thanks, Grace. Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to talk with everyone here today. I know when I first started designing, I had no idea what a design sprint was. So I'm super excited to share what I've learned along the way. This will be day one of our two-part series. So just to get you up to speed on what a design sprint is, we're going to just dive in. So I'm going to share my screen. Cool. And if everybody can see this okay, then we can just jump right into it. So to start off, my name is Adrienne. I am a MURAL Student Ambassador, and I am very passionate about UX UI design. Not only am I a student, but I'm working in the field, and I love getting to apply what I learned this week right into my everyday workflow. I enjoy being a design speaker and through peer mentorship, working with other junior designers like myself. So what is a design sprint? I mean, we already talked about, and we gave our own guesses as to what it is. But the gist of it, it's really was created back from Google Ventures. Of course, all these really cool things come out of Google. And Jake Knapp and his team created design sprints to quickly iterate and design and test complex business problems with real users. During design sprints, they are recognized for supporting the design of digital products, but the really cool thing about them is that they're versatile. They are used for business problems, for marketing campaigns, service designs, physical products, and really anything that you can think of. So the typical design sprint is about 5 days. This does change from company to company, from team to team, depending on what you're working on. But in a typical workflow, you would start thinking and ideating on Monday, really mapping out what you want to solve by ending the week on Friday, testing with actual users and getting some quick feedback along the way. The really great thing about design sprints is that it goes off of one of my greatest design values. We're all about collaboration as designers, and design sprints allow us to do just that. We know that nothing great is really built alone. So how can we get everyone into a room where we can get all of these diverse perspectives and ideas and create something really, really amazing? design sprints allow us to do that. So collaboration is at the heart of design sprints, and the goal is to bring a multidisciplinary team together to create that. With multiple perspectives in the room, you get tons of ideas, but you also get buy-in from everyone on board. So especially when you're doing this as part of an organization or a company, you have stakeholder buy-in from every part of the organization to get this done and dedicate this week to actually solving the problem. So design teams for a design sprint do vary. Roughly 5 to 7 people is the best fit for a design sprint. But depending on the project, you might have a full team of designers, or you might have designers and engineers. But what really few key roles that should be part of that is definitely someone that can lead the charge. That's a facilitator, a sprint master, someone that can ensure that the project goes as it should. Then you have someone that's the decider, someone that can make those quick decisions and be very firm on what we're solving and how we're going to solve that. In addition to that, we do have, your tech experts, your design experts, maybe somebody from the marketing team or any other stakeholder, maybe even outside of the company that really has a hold on the project. So if this is with like an outside client, maybe somebody from a different company, thinking of Google, they work with a lot of different partnerships. They might even bring in someone from those teams to ensure that they're part of the project as well.
Can I add something there real quick, Adrienne?
Yeah.
If you are asking yourself a question and you say, is this too many people? Like, how much can I wiggle 5 to 7? It's a 2-piece of pizza roll. How many people can you feed with 2 pizzas? That's how many people you can have on your design sprint team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Assuming they're normal levels of hungry, they haven't just like run a marathon, but 2 pizzas. That's all you get for your team.
That's all you get. You don't want too many cooks in the kitchen by any means, but you also don't always want it to be too small that you don't have enough perspectives to really make some good sound decisions that could actually represent your users. So how does it work? Really, the first step is getting prepared. We always think that maybe things start off on day one, but you really have to prep for success when it comes to a design sprint. So first things first is blocking off the entire week. So everyone in your team knows that this is the week that we're doing this, we're devoted to this time, and nobody can skip out. It's already on the calendar. Keep devices out of the think tank so you can focus on the project. We all know that we have tons of distractions around us all the time. So keeping phones out the way allows us to focus on the task at hand and come prepared with plenty of design tools, like not just your Figma or your Adobe XD, but get out some markers, your Post-its, your whiteboards. You want to be able to write down, jot down anything that comes to mind, sketch it out, put it up on the wall for everyone to see and be able to work together on it. And so looking at the whole week, Monday is day one, right? It sets the tone for the entire week. And it's all about understanding the goal. We want to know what we want to see accomplished by the end of the week. We're also looking to define what those business goals are in regards to the problem. So if there's something that needs to be solved from a business perspective, that also needs to be addressed as well. And we also start empathizing with our users and mapping out some key user paths so we know where we want to strive for improvement. So thinking about if it's a redesign of a website, what are those areas of drop-offs that we're having? What areas are our users unhappy with? What areas would marketing might want to see happen as part of this week? So you start to define those and really start thinking of the strategy from there. Tuesday, you get really in the nitty gritty of ideation. If you've ever heard of Crazy Eights, this is where that happens. Crazy Eights is a really cool design tool that I like to do a lot when I want to get as many ideas on a paper as possible. So jotting down 8 sketches in a very rapid sketch pace to try to get some ideas flowing. You may also do some fast competitor analysis. Maybe you know who your competitors are and the key feature that you're trying to go up against. This is where you can start thinking about how you compare and what areas of improvement are already needed, and maybe even some solutions. You start to explore those suggestions tomorrow. So your team and you will not be peeking. No talking about what you sketched on today. Tuesday is really about being in the zone and ideating. That's the main part of it. So Wednesday, we're already halfway there. This is where we get to come together and start deciding what will be implemented for next steps. This is a key role of the designer. Sometimes it's the project owner, sometimes it might be a CEO of a company, but whoever's really in charge of executing on what comes next in this process, they will start to decide what things will be left in and what things will be left out. This is a really great place to be in because you start to really build that collaboration together, and you can even start making decisions together. So maybe some high level outs that we really don't want to move forward with, this is where we can do that so that they're able to go and really look at the more important stuff, what things we might have more trouble deciding on that a decider might have to take control of. Thursday is day 4. This is my favorite part of the design sprint because I love prototyping. It is dedicated to that. So you get to take your solidified ideas from day 3, and we're looking to create a prototype of Goldilocks quality. Well, what does that mean, Adrienne? Well, it means that we want to create a prototype that is just right. It's not so high tech that we spend all the rest of our week trying to perfect it, and by the end of the week, it's still not done. But we also want it to be close enough to the final process that users can actually test with it and feel comfortable using it. So we don't want something that's more of a wireframe, that's pretty blank and might not engage the user enough, but we also don't want to spend too much time working on something that will need to be iterated on at a later time. We just want it to be just right, something that the user can get on to. And then Friday is our final day. It's test day. With our test scenarios lined up and our users picked out, that's when you will start to test your designs over 30-minute intervals for some quick 5 tests throughout the day. This is so that once you have completed those 5 tests, you and your team can work together on listening to those interviews, looking at the testing, and see whether it actually was a success, whether there was some great feedback that you might want to implement further into this design, or if it was a fail. What we'll learn about some key takeaways is that for designing or design sprints, you are here to learn fast and fail just as fast, right? We want to be able to say that this is something that's either going to work or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, we get to move on pretty quickly. Another big part of design sprints is that the user is at the center of your work. This is all about what makes the most sense for your users. And if it doesn't work for them, then you get to cut it and go on to the next phase. Or you get to implement it and move forward to something that's a little bit more hi-fi from here. In addition, all perspectives are considered. So not even from the business level, but from a diversity level as well. We want to make sure that all the perspectives of everyone involved were heard and felt throughout the testing that happened, or throughout the entire design sprint, I should say. And then finally, stakeholder expectations are clear, they're set from the beginning, and this whole process is efficient and effective. So you really know how to move forward by the end of the week. Whether you have a really nice design at the end or not, you know how to move forward with it. Cool. So Adrienne, I want to do it myself. I would love to do one on my own. How do I do that? Well, it's actually pretty easy. There's a lot of really great resources to do design sprints. And they don't have to be 5 days. They can be whatever you might have time to do. As you'll see tomorrow, we'll only have an hour and we can still do a design sprint in that time frame. They're a really great way to practice UX design, design thinking, and even cross-functional collaboration, just without the stress of getting it right the first time around. This is a really cool, fast and easy way to get some ideas out and actually create something in a very quick amount of time. And it can be portfolio ready. You can have something that you can add to this and really be able to show how you collaborated and designed with other people from the design community. So there's tons of resources around design sprints. One is a book written by Jake Knapp himself that really teaches how to solve those big problems in just 5 days. He goes through the entire design sprint process and really helps in transforming how you look at those 5 days and what you do within that time frame. Mural is also a very collaborative tool, right? You have templates where you can dive into design sprints right now. There's actually two. We have one that's created from Jake Knapp and his team that's pretty heavy. It's actually the exact same one that they use at Google Ventures to do design sprints. And then there's another one that's a little more simplified, but also helpful for remote design sprints. And then finally, Jake Knapp and his team created a remote design sprint guide. So even if this is your first sprint, you can really make this a success by using this guide to follow on to the next stages. Cool. So I wanted to be able to answer any questions there were around design sprints. I know we still had some people dropping in, so I'm sorry, but I would love to just talk a little bit more about them and any questions people had, especially in preparation for our design sprint tomorrow.
Feel free to raise your hand as well if y'all rather ask your questions and say hi or drop in the chat, whatever way you feel most comfortable.
Maybe I can just add a couple of things as folks are ruminating over their questions and adding those in the chat, or working up the courage to raise their hand. One of the things, and I know Adrienne had mentioned a little bit about this, but there are a lot of ways to run a design sprint, but preparation is key for any of those, right? The implication that you can test with users on day 5 means that you need to have users lined up to test with before you get to day 5, right? You're probably not going to get to test anything if you start your morning on Friday reaching out to test with people, because how many people answered net new emails on Friday? Not me. So those are things to think about. And there's some really great feedback on, especially that remote design sprint advice from Jake Knapp and team around how to do that. And how to get feedback from people in a meaningful way that isn't going to be biased by like your best friend being like, oh, it looks amazing, right? Like that's not super helpful, especially if your best friend isn't going to use the thing that you're trying. Adrienne, you want to go ahead and answer that question in the chat?
Yeah, I was actually just going to say, I see, Brandon, you mentioned how often are design sprints done on a monthly basis? And is this part of agile method? So agile is a methodology that can be applied to design sprints. So that is definitely something that can be possible. But in terms of how often they're done, it really depends on the company and the team. So for Google Ventures, this is something that they have done so often that this is their introduction to design sprints to essentially the rest of the world. For I know our company, or the company I currently work for, design sprints is not done as often. It's a really long iterative process on the products that we work on, but it can be a really great way to start thinking really fast about some of those small pieces when it comes to small parts of our process. So it really does depend on the company and the project, but design sprints are really all around us. A lot of students do design sprints. If you ever done a creative jam from like Adobe or I think even Figma has had jam sessions. Those are kind of like design sprints too, right? You're doing a project in a really short period of time. And so you have to think very creatively, on your feet, and efficiently about how to solve a certain problem in a very short time frame. But yeah, I think to your point, Brandon, it is a really good way to kickstart a UX research, because you really do start thinking pretty quickly about the problem, how to solve it.
The other maybe important distinction, and just kind of a final bit on your question is it part of agile method? It could be. I think you do want to be careful though, and Adrienne had mentioned this, you're not going to get what is traditionally an agile MVP out of this, right? Agile basically functions on the assumption that you have something that can be used at the end of every iteration that you go through with agile, right? So you're building on that every time you go through, but it is functional, right? It has function. That is not always the case when you're in a design sprint. If you have a really great engineer or set of designers on your team, it may be possible, but you're really trying to test and answer an experiment question. That's what you're doing at the end of the day, right? You're running an experiment. And sometimes that means it's not going to be fully functional. So just be careful about that, right? So it could be included in that, but the design sprint in 5 days is not going to give you the same thing as an agile quote unquote MVP. We've got a couple other questions in the chat. Adrienne, I'll let you answer some of those.
Yeah, so I'll start with Summer's question. What advice would you give to UX designers who are the only designer in a startup? How can we implement design sprints in our design process? So really, being the only designer doesn't count you out for not being able to do a design sprint. This is a really great way to connect with your engineers, with your PMs, with your other parts of your team, to start thinking about how you want to work with them in building a product, right? So a design sprint can be helpful to not only team building and that collaboration piece that can be so helpful no matter what project you're working on. But if it's a project that you would love to work on it together and really get synced in for a week, this would be a really great time to do so. I would say to implement design sprints in your design process, it depends on the type of projects you guys are working on. But like I mentioned, this is something that can be pretty quick turnaround for a project, right? So I wouldn't want to do like a feature that would be pretty life-changing to the product that I couldn't, work on for quite some time. And it's not to say that the 1 weeks can't be revisited. Once you've completed a design sprint, it doesn't mean that that's the end all be all of the product and that you never revisit it again. So you can implement this into your design process at pretty much any point of your projects that you're working on with your team, especially if you would like to revisit the research part piece again, because it does allow you to do that pretty early on. So I hope that answers the question, but I think it's a really great opportunity for you to get all of your teammates into one session to really think of how you guys work together on implementing a design. And then I see Craig had a question. How do you encourage team leaders or stakeholders to participate in a sprint when they don't always have time in their workday? So that's a super good question. When it comes to stakeholders being part of design sprints, a lot of times, depending on their overall process or how close they might be to a product, they might drop in 1 or 2 days. I've been a part of sprints where maybe the CEO or a PM drops in around like the deciding factors of a sprint, or maybe towards the end in testing where we want to see how things have worked together. So that can be a really great time to talk a little bit more about like for the stakeholders to come in. But for a stakeholder that really wants to be part of that process and has questions about how this project is coming along, this could be a really great way to invite them into the entire process to be part of the stakeholder side of this team. So it is hard sometimes when they do have a lot of days, work days and trouble. But what I would say is that this could be a really great point to exercise that type of team collaboration in which you really stand up for your users and say this could be a really great opportunity for all of us to have a pulse on how we're looking to iterate on this design.
You may also be able to think a little bit about stakeholders who may want to see something like the end product on your testing day, right? Because they may not need to be involved in the entire process for them to try to see some of the value coming out of that, right? So there, just because you have a small team involved throughout the entire thing, to Adrienne's point, right? Like getting an executive to be able to commit 5 days to this is probably wildly unrealistic, at least before they're fully like bought in. So just think about how you can include them in other ways, or even as experts that you test that product with, if they're a relevant user, or that prototype with, because that's a good way to also get buy-in on seeing the process without necessarily being the one conducting the process. And I think we also missed a question up from, I'm going to butcher your name, I'm sorry, Macon. Grace, I think you said you had some ways to answer that. Do you want to add in there as well?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Adrienne, feel free to like add anything else if you want as well. But Macon asks how to promote the shift in the culture from top-down solutions to a collaborative way, just as y'all said, to increase buy-in from all stakeholders. So I can give an example from work. I can't give too many details due to NDAs, but basically I work on a lot of marketing products at EA. And one of the situations that I was recently in actually was that there was a push to get more users without really getting buy-in from all the stakeholders. And so what I've done is I try to reach out to everyone, and basically a lot of sometimes like user research was skipped. That sometimes happens in the real world as well. People would like skip user research, skip ideations and stuff. It also depends on different timelines you're working with too. So in the real world, that happened. A lot of research was skipped. So I tried to just like advocate for research and explain like why we need this feature, why we need this flow fleshed out before acquiring more users, because we need to retain them. And at the end of the day, in the workplace, people will just want to succeed. And so if you explain to them why design with sprint will help them out, achieving a common goal, that will help increase buy-in from all stakeholders as well. And feel free to add anything else, anyone, if I missed anything too.
No, I think you made a really great point, Grace, because I know from my work experience, at times you as a designer might be very much about the user and the experience. And that's also where your stakeholders might be, but they also have their own set of goals and metrics and OKRs that they have to meet as well. So being able to bring it back to where your commonalities lie is so important, right? To say that excuse me, I'm getting over a cold that my son gave me, so forgive me, but but just being able to bring it back to this is how we can meet certain business goals and how we can meet certain metrics by going back to that beginning process, I think is so important, and really helps in bringing that buy-in. I think in addition to that, in my experience, bringing some allies with you can be also very helpful, right? I know engineers don't want to have to continue to develop something over and over again, if maybe, especially if it's going to push a timeline out. So being able to have like a PM or an engineer or someone on your teams that might not be a designer, but at least is another person with skin in this game as well, that can be able to advocate with you and really stand by your suggestions as well, can be super helpful.
Yeah, and just really involving product and engineering in the very beginning to make sure that your design ideas meet business goals and technical feasibility, and people get to contribute, and an idea in the beginning stages helps create buy-in as well.
Yeah, no, 100%, I agree. I think
Got a question from Adriana. What are some resources to get users for remote design sprints?
That is super good question. So there's some really great sites for user testing. I know depending on the companies, at times I've used those type of like remote, I think it's called usertesting.com, if I can remember correctly. But something like that where you can send out like your project or what you're looking for, and they can find that for you. Or there's other ones in which I've also just done some really like hard beats on LinkedIn and Instagram to get people to connect with me and talk with me for just a couple minutes. And sometimes you also find them in-house. I know a lot of times when we are doing, and this is particular to my company, a lot of the work that we do is very internal, and we work on the processes that are affecting employees on different teams. And so being able to connect with them directly to speak with them is fairly not easy, but we want to reach out to who will be using the system or the product at the end of the day. So I would say for resources in terms of remote design sprints, definitely don't hesitate to reach out on LinkedIn. There's so many different groups like Design Buddies, and there's other UX groups on there that would be happy to drop your survey in there, get whoever matches your description for your users, and set up a quick call to do a couple of user interviews, which can, in a design sprint, doesn't need to be no more than like 5, right? You're doing something that's going to be very time consuming for that week. So you don't want to overbear yourself with like too many user interviews in that day.
I love it. We had a couple of folks also add in other resources in the chat. So check the chat out because we've got people chiming in with all sorts of other resources to recruit users. Like Adrienne mentioned, you'll also want to be really cognizant of anytime you're sending out a survey on anything like social, right? Or LinkedIn or whatever. Make sure you have a screener question built in so that you're really getting the right people, right? Because it's not worth your time to interview 5 people for an hour apiece if they are completely the wrong audience and then you've wasted an interview slot. So there's some other good advice from Jake Knapp and some of the documents that Adrienne has prepped for you guys, but just keep that in mind. Okay, so Karina's asking, is there a best time to run a design sprint in a company that, may be structured and scheduling things really far out, that maybe has a little bit more of a waterfall way of working? How would you recommend kind of bringing design sprint into that company?
That is a really good question. I'm gonna have to think about that. I mean, I have personally haven't worked in a waterfall setting. So that's super interesting for me to think of how a design sprint would fit in that way, because design sprints are so fast paced in such a short period of time. I don't know.
Maybe I can. I was like, maybe I can chime in. So I've worked at a couple waterfall companies because that's how healthcare works, or remote healthcare works. And I would recommend Karina, thinking about what a good use of that in your team would be, right? Because you may not be able to do the full product definition in a design sprint, right? Like that's probably even too big of a question generally for your design sprints, right? We're not trying, like, your question probably isn't, how do I save the world? Your question is a little bit more specific than that. It's something that you can test. So think about that when you're thinking about design sprint. Do you have 3 or 4 teammates you could run one with on a specific feature that you're building, or on a specific interface that's like net new, right? Where people may not know anything about what they're supposed to be building or doing. Someone may have some assumptions, but we know how assumptions end up. So those are great places to try to introduce it, because nothing is lost by trying a design sprint in those cases, right? Because someone's going to have to spend time developing it anyways. So the least you could do is test out. And if it does or doesn't work, if it doesn't work, definitely not to build it like this. Let's maybe pivot and try something else, and you'll have feedback. And if it does work, you're like, aha, it's faster than it would have been already. So start small, right? Baby bites first. And Grace, I saw you wanted to chime in there too.
Oh yeah, definitely personal with start small. Like sometimes at work, like we've done design sprints on just like new features of products or features that need another pass, another enhancement on. So it doesn't have to be like think save the world. It could be like how might we make users sign up more, or like how might we, I mean that's again NDA territory, but like yeah, how might we encourage users to blah blah blah, like this is goal in mind, and then think of different solutions for that.
I love that. And Annette, we may be answering your question because I see your question is what types of projects would design sprints typically be used for? Would they only be for small feature uplifts like navigation bars? Any and all, right? I think it's a matter of how bought in your team is and how much they want to be using it. It is also like one of the things to acknowledge, right? Especially as everyone's been doing this remote for the last couple of years, et cetera, is like design sprints are exhausting. You do not want to be running them constantly. You will burn your team out. Don't want that. So just be thoughtful about what you're using them for and how regularly you're running them so that it makes sense and you have time to react and use the stuff you're collecting from your sprints to then go and have someone, actually spend the 3 weeks building the feature as opposed to building like the functional wireframe thing that convinced people to give you feedback on the feature. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Anything else to add there, Adrienne?
No, I think you're spot on. I agree with every part of that. It is a very exhausting process, especially if you're doing it too often. So you would definitely want to take it in small strides. I think design sprints are everything that you want to make it, and you can really change it up however you and your team see fit. So whatever you think might be helpful to do those 5 steps of doing some mind mapping, some researching, maybe a small competitor analysis, a quick design and test it real fast to see if it works. That I think that if it works for your team, definitely feel free to try it out. I do see Kristen's question. I didn't want to forget that. Kristen asked, excuse me, how do you word design sprints into your portfolio? I have done it just like that. Just saying a design sprint. I think what's the most important piece is ensuring that you identify what your role was in your process. So when someone is looking at your portfolio and they're looking at the project, you really want to give clarity as to why a design sprint might have been the best process for this, what your role was, and how you contributed to the overall project, and then finally what the results were of your process. So just like any other case study, really drilling home what the results were and how you might have iterated on that from there can be really helpful. But you could call it a collaboration project, you could call it a design sprint. Design sprints are pretty well known of a word throughout design, so it would be something that a recruiter or a hiring manager, I should say, would definitely know what you're referring to.
I also want to add on to that as well. I think like another good way to frame design sprints is sort of to tell a story about, like your process from the beginning to end. Because like you're starting with a problem and you're eventually ending up with some sort of solution or some sort of like plan for further iteration onto a solution. And so like throughout that process, like you're going to have this sort of like idea of ways to like approach this problem, like things that you might find like stuck out to you at certain moments. And like just framing it as a story makes it like a lot more palatable to like a hiring manager or like anyone who's reading your portfolio. And it really like helps like like show your thought process a lot when you're talking about how you went through the design sprint.
And take lots of pictures. That would be very helpful to show your process and all the great work that you and your team did. So take lots of pictures.
Regardless of whether it's virtual or in person, right? Screenshots also speak a million words if you can't do it in person with your team. And this actually tees really nicely into Adriana's question. How can you find a topic to center your design sprint around, especially if you're not in a company, like you're creating a new, mock piece for your portfolio? Maybe I'll really quickly try to answer that and then have you guys jump in as well. You probably have, how many designers, maybe by show of react emoji, have a project in their portfolio they wish they would have been able to spend a little bit more time on? Like, hi, guilty. Probably literally everybody. Yeah, okay. If you have literally any project that you're like, you know what, I'd love like 3 more days on this, guess what? You should run a design sprint on that. Running a design sprint on something that you don't have built yet is really, really hard, especially if that's going to be your first time running a design sprint. To kind of practice the methodology. So give yourself something concrete, even if it's imaginary, right? Even if it's like mock-up stuff for your portfolio. Pick a project that you're like, I love this. I know people who I could have as experts for this, experts, right? Quote unquote experts. No one's an expert in anything, but like experts for. And then make sure, like, read the documentation so that you know you have the right people and the team to do that with you. And then do that on something that you already have parts and pieces for, right? Don't start from like literally zero. You're gonna cry. It's really, really hard.
I want to piggyback what Michelle was saying, because actually I was gonna answer that question too, and I was gonna say I actually did something similar. So, during like I think the start of the semester, I was looking at my portfolio and I realized there were some couple ones that, as Michelle was saying, that, oh, I wish I did this, I did, I wish I had more expansion on this project. And I actually did a really quick 1 week, just like design sprint where I just really quick did some low fidelity wireframe, and I felt really good about it. So like, I think with the topic, it could be anything. It could be a recreate of an app. It could be a problem that you're interested in. For example, like for me, I'm interested in the kids space, so I really wanted to think of ideas that correlate with that space. Yeah. So like the topics could be either really small or really big, but again, like everyone's saying, like we're not trying to save the world, like step by step.
And also, like, remember, like, design sprints don't have to be constrained to, just the 5-day process that Google Ventures does. Like, if you want to, like, start with a larger problem, you can definitely take a longer time with design sprints. It's all about the process itself rather than the time frame.
I love that. That's also a good call for some of the folks asking about, like, how do you get people to get involved, etc. Feel free to break it out. You may actually, when we do our second phase of this tomorrow, recognize some of the activities from some of the phases, right? Or some of the days. And you may be like, oh, I know how to do that. Or I know how to do 70% of that. Great. Like, use that, right? Start with day 1 and run like, we're just going to block out everyone's Tuesday and we're going to run the Monday workshop on a Tuesday. And then we'll let everyone like breathe for a week and a half. And then we're going to run the Tuesday workshop on a Thursday afternoon when we have the time. So feel free to mix and match as well. Very intended. And then we've got a couple of questions from Margaret. What about doing that for app critique, like doing a design sprint as part of an app critique?
I've actually done something similar. I can speak a little bit on this if that's okay. So my first ever, so this is just an idea. So like my first ever product design project was taking an existing app and looking at what are the potential problems people face with it and how might we solve it. And the app I did it with was actually Discord. And the problem I was just like interviewing people and thinking of was it's hard to keep track of messages on Discord. And so did a design sprint with 2 of my buddies and ultimately came up with a solution on Discord bookmarks. So it's actually a fictional case study, but it was actually one I used during my EA interview that helped me land the job, because it was a good like first project because it was already an existing business model, existing app, existing users, and I was just showcasing my ability to like solve a problem that I've like validated in my app. So I guess that's what you mean. But yeah, feel free to chime in anytime.
I think we've got maybe a follow-on question from Ed about, do you know of any design sprints for a product, not for an app or website? I can maybe take a quick stab at that, and then like happy to have everyone else chime in as well. Yes, that was the only thing I did at one of my companies, because we didn't deliver any apps or websites. We delivered literally only physical product, like huge, giant, massive product that people interacted with in a healthcare setting. So yes, same thing, literally the exact same format. Your only difference is going to be your prototyping section on your Thursday, right? Your day 4. You're probably going to want some little bit different people in the room. Clearly, you're not going to have them build like the actual thing working, right? But this is a great way for you to use some of your other designer toolbox things. So this is an awesome opportunity to use things like 3D printing if you have access to it. There's a bunch of things through Lego where they have Lego like design thinking toolkits where you can quickly build tiny mock-ups using things like Legos or any other knickknacks and stuff you may have around. It may even literally be taking the current product that you have and cutting up one and pasting a bunch of stuff back on it, or putting a fake button on it, and like having your team, when they do the testing, have someone simulate what the thing is doing as part of the testing, right? So that'll be a little bit fake it till you make it on the testing on day 5, but completely able to do it with products too. You just have to be a little creative on the actual build. And there may be things that you're trying to test that aren't necessarily physical interaction, right? You may actually want to be testing for a physical product. Would people buy this? And then you don't care. You don't need to build a product. You need to build a really, really convincing landing page for your product, or product video for your product, right? So it's all about the question you're answering, but there are ways around doing that. Any other comments on that question, you guys?
I was just going to say, I agree. I mean, I've done one for a marketing campaign where the prototyping was literally creating 2 different types of marketing campaigns and releasing it for A and B test. That was our testing day. Like, it can really be whatever you want to make it, whether it be a digital product like an app or website, a physical product, like Michelle was saying, or even in service design. Sometimes that might be a marketing campaign. Done it for an experience that really is kind of like more like a phone touch point experience through service design. So it really could be whatever you make it, as long as you build it and then test it and then try to bring your team back in for feedback, right? So did it work? Did it not work? Is it something that we would like to move forward with? Or do we want to kill our darlings now and try to redo this again? So that's really all that I think is the heart of design sprints. It can really be whatever you decide to make it of.
I love that. Maybe the only other thing I'd add in generally is that when you're done with a design sprint, say people generally mostly like it, right? Like maybe your feedback is like 55% positive. Y'all, that's a majority. We move forward with majorities here. Like, you say yes. And there is actually, in many of the design sprint resources, especially I think Jake Knapp's book Sprint 2.0, I think has some of that too. They recommend what they call an iteration sprint, which is shorter. I think it's like 3 days. They basically eliminate day 1, part of day 1 and most of day 2, or most of day 1 and 3. I can't remember, but essentially it's intended to shorten it, right? Because you already have the feedback. You have the feedback directing you, so it's a lot easier for your team to quickly identify, like, okay, what do we need to test and change and modify to move from 55% people would be like, yeah, I'd buy that. That seems generally good, to 85 or 90. And those are super fast as well. So that may be something else to think about, is if you already have feedback from something else that you've done, it may be worth actually looking at something like an iteration sprint instead of the entire sprint as well, for a test and taste of the process.
And that's where the templates in Mural really come into play, right? Because whether when you do it in person, you're doing it with like a lot of sticky notes, right? There's a lot of material that's probably pasted up on the wall and it stays there. You get to review it and things like that. Whereas in remote settings, with Mural at least, you have the template. You could always revisit this and reiterate on it. So if this is something that you are looking to come back to and say, like, this worked, but we can make it better, or it didn't work as well. What would make it be that 75 to 80% of our users like it? Come back into your template, get back into it, bring the team back together to review it and try it again in those last 3 days, and see how it changes even further from there. It's something that can forever live. It can be a living, breathing dog that every couple of months this feature might update. Who knows?
Any additional questions folks want to put in the chat? I know we're close to our closing time. Otherwise, raise your hand. We'll take you off mute.
Or we could do a quick group photo first and wait for more questions. Or raise your hand, buddies. Yeah, we can do a quick group photo. It's our little design buddy tradition. But in the meantime, we do have a few more minutes. We can probably take 1 or 2 more questions. So I'll count down 5 seconds. We can do our group photo and then a wave for our Instagram story. As we wait for, in case y'all have more questions, give you all more time. So yeah, if you want to turn on your camera, don't be shy. We're all really nice. Yeah, I will count down 10 seconds and then we'll do a static one first and then a wave for Instagram story. And y'all are welcome. If you don't want to be on camera, you can react and then we can see you can use your favorite emoji on Zoom and you'll get it in there too. Just keep reacting to it because we'll take a couple of group photos. And with that, I'll count down. Oh, feel free to bring any object you want. Like I have Fluffle with me. I have Wumpus as well, that's in my room. Maybe I'll have a jellyfish this time. Just to, spice things up a little bit. Well, blue. This is actually reversible. See, it's blue. Now it's pink and it's blue. Anyways, I just want to go wrong. All right, so ready? All right, we're gonna do a static one first. So I'll count down 5 seconds. You can smile, and then we'll do a wave for Instagram story. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Say design sprint. All right, we're gonna do a wave for Instagram story at Design Buddies. We like to spice things up over here. We'd like to end it with a little dance or wave. You can dance, jab, do whatever you want, but this is gonna be our Instagram story at design.buddies. Let me share that part. Let me just get some stuff on the screen too. And feel free to react as well if y'all want. All right, ready, set, wave. Okay. Hello, buddies. We just had a wholesome talk about running design sprints with our buddies at MURAL. Make sure to join us for part 2 happening tomorrow, where we'll be going through design sprint together. Thank you, buddies. Cool. Awesome. This is going to be our Instagram story at design.buddies. We have some time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions if anyone wants to go. Feel free to raise your hand or drop them in the chat. Going once, going twice.
If we don't have any more questions, I can sort of give you guys like a quick overview of what tomorrow's session is going to look like. So tomorrow we're going to take what we learned from Adrienne's lovely presentation on design sprints and sort of apply that to our own design sprints. Since we only have an hour and not 5 days, it's going to be like a very condensed version of it. But hopefully like this exposes you to, like some of the activities that often go on in design sprints, and sort of like helps you figure out how to really approach these when you're applying them to some of your projects for your portfolio or, like when you're working, all that fun stuff. We're not going to tell you the prompt because we want it to be a surprise, so that you all can ideate together. So please stay tuned, come back tomorrow, and yeah.
With that, I'll also drop a link in the chat. We've been taking notes on everyone's questions today, and have a mural board with links to all of the things that Adrienne's been talking about. So you're probably like, Michelle, we need the resources. Where are they? They're here. They're here. They're in the chat. Feel free to double click that link. We'll make sure that the Design Buddies team gets that link too. So feel free to check that out if you want to start musing on your own things. But the prompt will not be hidden in there. So if you're like, I only want it for the prompt, it's not there. You'll have to wait until tomorrow.
Awesome. Just share it on Discord as well. Cool. If not, we'll end it here and see y'all at 5 p.m. Pacific time or wherever this time is tomorrow. This 90 minutes back in your time zone. We have a million different time zones, so yeah, you should see the time on your Luma. I know daylight saving time really knocked me out of my time zone perspectiveness. Yeah, anyway, that's another topic. Cool. Well, thank you all buddies for coming. I'm gonna stop my